Senator, we spoke about this last night, but there have been outlets that have accused you of being inconsistent or of perhaps even lying about the story you tell on the trail about being fired from your first job as a special needs teacher for being pregnant. I want to give you a chance off the bat to just lay out sort of the events as they happened, as you saw them.
Sure. So this was my first job, and I was teaching, I was the speech therapist for mostly special needs kids age 4 to 6. And I loved the work. I loved the kids. I worked well with the parents, and it was everything I hoped it would be. And then in the spring of my first year, in April, my contract was renewed for the next year, and I was all set to go. But I was pregnant at the time, wasn't showing yet. About 2 months later, when I was visibly pregnant, about 6 months along, the principal called me in and said that he wished me luck, but he'd be more comfortable having someone else in that job, and he was going to hire someone else for the job. And that was it. I lost my job.
What kind of set off the questions about this was this interview you gave in 2007 at Berkeley, where you told the story and didn't talk about the forceful removal, but talked about this emergency certificate you were on.
Right.
And the minutes from the school board meeting show that there was something like that. Can you explain just what that was and sort of what the confusion is around that?
So when I was first hired, I didn't have all of the right courses for a permanent certificate, but I was hired, so it was called an emergency certificate, a 1 year. But I'd already been renewed for the next year, so I'd already been granted the certificate going forward. Although at some point I was going to fill in the rest of the courses I needed.
The line I think in question here is that it's not in the stump speech right now, but you would say you were shown the door.
Yeah.
Do you think that was an accurate description of what happened?
Sure. Because what happened was when they didn't know I was pregnant, they gave me the job and said, "You're hired for the next year. It's yours, kid." And when they discovered I was pregnant, they said, "Oops, no, we're going to hire someone else for the job. It's not yours."
News outlets a couple months ago reported a few that you were laid off, and specifically then also that they used the word firing. Is it accurate to say you were fired, or were you forced to resign, or how would we characterize this?
Look, it doesn't matter much what the term is, but let's be clear. I was 6 months pregnant. It was my first job. I was 22 years old. And the job that was mine, that I'd been hired for the next year, was taken away when they knew I was pregnant.
Just to be clear, because I want to make sure I have this down, they were not incorrect, though, to say that you were fired.
Yeah, I don't know what else you'd call it. I mean, it was my job. And in April, they'd said, "You're doing a great job, come back next year." And when they found out I was pregnant, they changed that.
What does it signify to you that this is sort of running on conservative media outlets nonstop right now?
I think of it in a very different way. I think of how this resonates with so many millions of women across this country and people who've been in, if not that exact situation, similar situations. Look, people today get pushed out of their jobs, sometimes pretty aggressively, and sometimes it's a little more subtle. But we're hearing a case right now today in the United States Supreme Court over whether or not people can be fired because they're gay, or whether or not they can be fired because they're trans. This is an issue that just keeps going on. And it was one I lived up close and personal when I was 22 years old. And it's hard.
In this part of your stump speech, where just like moving back to that, you described this as a job that you would still be doing today. It was the dream job, and it seems like there are usually a lot of teachers, a lot of special need teachers in the audience who cheer and raise their hands and back you up on it as you ask them to.
I always ask them to.
But on your law school application, when you describe it, you sort of say that you had moved and then you sought work in the profession you had studied in college rather than going to grad school. Is the way that you look at that changed? Because, some people might say that that's another instance of the story developing.
No. Look, it was clear that I wasn't going to be able to do this. And I was looking for something else to do and hatched the idea of going to law school. So I applied to law school. And that's how I ended up. Baby on hip, going to a public law school, cost $450 a semester. Graduated from law school, visibly pregnant, and practiced law out of my living room for a short period of time because, frankly, nobody really wanted a pregnant lawyer at that time or somebody with 2 little babies.
Senator, the president doubled down this morning on his calls to pull troops from northern Syria. What's your initial reaction to that, and what would you do about Syria if you were president?
Look, I think we need to get our troops out of the Middle East. We're not making it a more stable place. But the way Donald Trump has done it has just created more chaos and more risk for everyone. I don't think this morning that anyone could describe our policy towards Syria. He seemed to say yesterday that they had a green light to run over our allies, the Kurds, who fought alongside us against ISIS. And then this morning did this bizarre tweet about how in his infinite wisdom he would decide if they had crossed a line and then destroy them. This makes no sense. And he's just creating more chaos in the region. That does not make the United States any stronger, and it does not make the world any safer.
President Trump just announced that he's raised the largest Q3 fundraising total of $42 million. You have had success to this point without holding big dollar fundraisers. As you're kind of emerging as a front runner here, do you wonder if perhaps you would pivot to having big dollar fundraisers in a general election or be forced to do that? Could you continue doing what you're doing? No, I will not be forced to make changes in how I raise money. Look, for me, this is pretty straightforward. Either you think democracy works and electing a president is all about going behind closed doors with bazillionaires and corporate executives and lobbyists and scooping up as much money as possible. Or you think it's about a grassroots, let's build this from the ground up. And the problem is, so long as it's the wealthy and well-connected who finance the presidential elections, then we're going to continue to have a government that works really great for the wealthy and the well-connected and just not work for much of anyone else. My campaign is all about changing that. It's all about making this country, making this government, making this democracy work, not just for those at the top, but for everyone. And here's the thing, it's working. And can you guarantee your supporters that under no circumstances, no matter how much money Donald Trump is raising, you will not take big dollar?
Yeah, I'm not going to go do the big dollar fundraisers. I'm just not going to do it. The whole notion behind this campaign is that we can build this together. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're bringing in hundreds of thousands of people. We continue to grow it every single day. People who say, I want a government that doesn't just work for those guys. I want a government that works for me. A government that cares about canceling student loan debt. A government that cares about expanding Social Security and making it viable for decades into the future. A government that really cares about our climate and is willing to fight the big oil companies. A government that cares about our health care. A government that cares not just about giant corporations and people who've already made it, but a government that is about investing in a future that works for everyone. We have such an opportunity in 2020. And I think it starts right here on the ground, building this grassroots movement. And I just feel so optimistic about what it is that we're doing together. We're going to do this. 2020 is our chance to turn this country around and to make this democracy work.
Senator, thank you very much. I'll be seeing you tomorrow in South Carolina.
Good. Thank you very much. I appreciate your being here, Zach.